This coming Tuesday, sources telling CTV News that is India's deadline for Canada to dramatically reduce our diplomatic staff in their country. It all comes after the Prime Minister announced Canada has intelligence showing India was involved somehow in the killing of a Canadian citizen in British Columbia earlier this year. Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar gunned down in June. Well, Trudeau's accusation sparking outrage from the Indian government, and a huge firestorm has escalated ever since. Joining us now to break down the consequences of all of this is Senator Peter Boehm. He's a former ambassador, foreign service officer, and Sherpa for the G7 group of nations. He is the head of the Committee on Foreign Affairs as well as International Trade. Senator Boehm, thanks for taking the time for CTV today. Much appreciated.
Good to be here, Todd. Thank you.
The implications of this diplomatic drawdown by India.
Well, we're in uncharted territory, Todd, because diplomatic relations are governed by an international instrument called the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. That goes back to 1961. And there's nothing in there that suggests a drawdown, a unilateral drawdown imposed by the receiving state, or the word parity never shows up in that convention either. Now, I'm not an international lawyer, but I have a bit of experience internationally, and this has not been done. So we're really into a bit of a nerve games here, a nerve game looking ahead to Tuesday.
Yeah, when you talk about a nerve game, I wonder whether you think this is kind of a who blinks first situation, Senator.
Well, I don't know, and I think cooler heads should prevail, and obviously the volume has to be dialed down. I noticed that Foreign Minister Jaishankar of India was just in Washington meeting with Secretary of State Blinken. Nothing in the communique suggests that they discussed this issue, but I'm pretty sure that they did behind the scenes. So I think Canada, too, has been reaching out initially obviously to India through quiet diplomacy to have a discussion about this, to see how we can cooperate. Obviously, that did not work. There are other countries who have been involved one way or another in helping on the intelligence and security side. These are within the Five Eyes community. So I'm assuming that there's a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes.
Should we be worried, Senator, that India is acting like a bully here?
Well, worry in the sense that this has not been tried before, and if a receiving state can unilaterally say, without declaring personnel persona non grata, which is the term that is used, if they can unilaterally say, okay, you've got to remove people, but not declare them persona non grata and not give cause for this, instead to say, well, it's parity and you have too many people, there's nothing in international law that suggests that they can do that. So maybe this is a bit of an overreaction. Maybe it's part of the power projection that India wants to undertake in showing how it can demonstrate to wealthy countries and others that it is in control of this situation. Maybe it is a fit of pique. I don't know, but the temperature certainly has to be dialed down, because if you move in this direction, who is to say that other countries can't do the same thing, and diplomatic personnel might simply not be safe and have the privileges and immunities that are accorded to them under the convention that I mentioned.
What would your advice be for the Prime Minister amid all this?
I think, well, my advice, and I'm sure this is the advice that he and Minister Joly are getting, is let's keep trying, talking to our friends, talking to Indian authorities as directly as we can, or through others, to come to the table. It might be a quiet table, it might be a rather stern table as well, and discuss this particular issue. And attempts were made, as I said beforehand, both on the part of the National Security Advisor and the Director of CSIS, to engage with their Indian counterparts and to demonstrate that we have an issue here that needs to be resolved. And there is some pretty compelling evidence that suggests that a murder, an assassination, was conducted on Canadian soil of a Canadian at the behest of another country.
We've been covering this for the better part of 3 weeks. I know you've been following very closely. Are you concerned, Senator, this might get worse before it gets better?
Well, I think it might very well get worse, and I understand that some staff have been repositioned. That makes sense. That's the prudent thing to do in terms of the duty of care that should be offered by the government and by Global Affairs Canada to its personnel abroad. But how it could get worse is obviously on the visa, consular, and immigration front. We have a tremendous relationship with India. We're one of the oldest democracies in the world, and India is the largest one, and we have people-to-people contact that is almost unrivaled, and that's also why we have a fair amount of diplomatic staff there. Many of them are not analysts or eyes and ears or traditional diplomats. Many are those who process visas and immigration cases and student visas. So this is going to impact as well our population in Canada of Indian origin in terms of the connection they would have with their families and with friends and with people who are going back and forth.
In retrospect, do you think it was wrong for Canada to take on or call out a regional superpower like India in such a public way?
Well, I think I go back to 2003 when Mr. Chrétien, then the Prime Minister, stood up in the House of Commons and said that Canada would not join the Second Iraq War with the United States. So if a Prime Minister goes into the House and makes a statement, it's very different than at a press conference. He is speaking to the people of Canada in the tribune of the people. So obviously it is a very serious matter, and that is why Mr. Trudeau announced it in the House. You can't do this through Twitter, X. You can't do it through social media or through a press conference. If it's a matter of great national security and gravity, that's where you announce and explain to the nation what is going on.
I know a lot of Canadians confused over this story, Senator, as they've been following it, thinking India is a close ally and a friend. In many ways it is. But as you know, there's also what many call a nationalist populist leader in power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who doesn't seem all that interested in what Canada has to say on this issue. What are the implications of that, the Indian government that's currently in power?
Well, we have, as Canada, many connections with the Indian government and also with the subnational governments, the state governments in India through our provinces and the like. So the people-to-people ties are important. There are many things where in the past we have collaborated very closely with India and continue to do so, certainly on science. During the pandemic, that was very evident. But there are also areas where we have disagreed. And if you look at the historical relationship, India, to detonate its first nuclear bomb, used plutonium that had been produced in a Canadian research reactor that had been given to India. That was not the purpose. So the relationship, ironically then, with Pierre Trudeau went into a nosedive. And we had to recover from that. There was the Air India bombing, of course, which was also significant in the sense of how it impacted bilateral relations. So we've had our ups and downs, but we still keep talking. And if there ever was a moment where we should keep talking, it certainly is this one.
Senator Peter Boehm joining us from Ottawa. Senator Boehm, thank you for taking the time. Much appreciate you taking the time to be here on Power Play with us today.
Thank you, Todd.